Good evening, everyone. It's very nice to see everyone, and perhaps some will be watching this at another date other than this evening. It's Friday, November 26th. My name is Rick Morse. I live in Berwick, Nova Scotia, in the lovely Annapolis Valley. I was born in November 1957, and I was born again in December 1978. And very, very privileged to have lived two-thirds of my life as a Christian. So I've been asked this evening to explain as best as I'm able how the Lord brought me to him. I was 21 years old at the time. So not a whole lot different than anybody else, I don't think, really, because we all come to the same place eventually. I guess I began at about 10 or 11 years old to be aware of something missing. There was a hole there, and I wasn't quite sure what it is or what it was. And we grew up going to a mainstream Protestant denomination, and I probably heard the gospel in those days. I don't remember hearing it, but I probably did. Yeah, but I remember this emptiness, and I remember wondering the same questions that just about everybody asks. Why am I here? Where did I come from? And where am I going? Everybody who's watching this has asked themselves those questions. And please, don't try to do anything to blot them out. Keep looking for answers to those questions. Very, very important. I remember watching Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon in 1969, so I was 11 and a half then. And as I was sitting there and watching this, and I was all enthralled with it all, I was wondering to myself, what did they go there looking for? I know they spent billions of dollars and come back with a bunch of rocks, but they must have been looking for something else. And I've more recently learned of the SETI Institute, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. So human beings have always been looking out into the stars and looking at other planets, hoping to find life on other planets. Why? Mom says I asked that question. It was every fourth word out of my mouth growing up. Why? Why are they looking for life on other planets? Well, it has to do with evolution. Because if evolution was a spontaneous process that happened here, then it must have happened somewhere else. And so they need to find it there in order to back up their theories. So far, they've been unsuccessful. They haven't even found water, which we know is the basis of life. So I was asking myself these questions, and there's nothing original about them. I began to read. I love to read. I always have. So I started reading some philosophy and stuff. And of course, my friends thought it was crazy when you go to school in grade 7 and grade 8, and you've got a philosophy textbook in your knapsack. They're looking at you like a weirdo. And that's okay. I guess. But I was looking for answers. I had to have answers to these questions because not having answers was painful. The mind doesn't work right, and the heart doesn't work right, and there's no purpose in life, and so on. So I was looking for these things. So as I looked through the different philosophies and whatnot, and sciences and all that, they all had one thing in common. They failed miserably, thoroughly. They failed. Science, I turned my back on Christianity probably around grade 10 and jumped into science. I entered a science fair in Cape Breton. We were living in Sydney at the time. I won that and won a trip to Ottawa and some money and so on. When the newspaper reporter asked me afterwards what was the greatest thing I learned in putting this project together, I told her, I said, it isn't true. That's what I learned. It isn't true. Anyway, so I'm glad they already gave me the prize because they probably wouldn't have after that. So I looked at all these things and I started looking at different religions out of the East and different cults around that we have in North America and so on. And they're all the same. Every one of them was giving me some recipe about follow this code of conduct, obey these tenets, perform these rituals, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you're going to somehow earn yourself into some deity's favor. But I looked at those and I never saw anywhere how. How do I do that? I didn't have the will to. I didn't have the ability to. And so basically anybody that embraces any of that, we're leaving ourselves as a victim of a cruel guessing game. We have to wait till the end of our lives. Did I do enough? Was I good enough? Did I say it right? Did I go to the right places? Did I do my chores and duties and everything? So that was miserable. So from there, grade 12, and then I went to university for 1 year at Acadia, I embraced atheism. And I was going around Acadia and I was handing out booklets in the dormitories about atheism and so on. But after I thought about it for a little while and looked at it a little bit more, atheism really has no substance. All it is just a thin veil to disguise defiance against God. So all of these things, we look for all these things and we try to run and hide from all these things. And the reason we do can be answered with one word: accountability. People do not want to be accountable. Morally or ethically, we don't want that. We've even in our culture, we've changed the definition of the word freedom. Freedom used to be freedom from bondage to a monarchy or bondage to a tyranny of some kind. Freedom nowadays is being able to do whatever you want without consequences. That's our social definition of freedom in these days. Anyway, so by this time, by the end of grade 10 or by the end of grade 12 and into university, I was hurting more than ever. So I decided to turn to some other things. I turned to drugs. Lots of marijuana and some LSD and mushrooms and things like that. Did for several years. And all that did is made me feel worse. If we get a little minute in time, I might go into the fact I'm bipolar. I was officially diagnosed quite a few years ago. And I think some of it might have to do with the drugs. Runs in my family, my dad, my son, my sister, we're all part of it. And as I did all these drugs and different things, it just compounded my misery. At 19 years old, I was working at a grocery store in Dartmouth, and I met a very pretty brunette lady named Janie. Janie bought me a Bible. I never owned a Bible before. And then she also invited me with her friends. Some of you might remember Bob and Madeline Davies. They started inviting me to some of the meetings over at Fairview Bible Chapel. And I would go and I'd sit there with my arms folded defiantly. I knew better. These gullible people, they're deceived. I know better than these people. I looked at the church as just a community feel good sort of an organization. And at that time, I preferred drugs because there was no moral obligations. I met a fellow there named Martin, guy about my age, maybe a little older. And he asked me one day, come over, says, he introduced himself. He said, do you have a Bible? I said, yes, I do. I said, I don't know where to start. He said, can I recommend a place? I said, sure. He said, Romans, first 5 chapter of Romans. Okay. When I'm through that, what should I do? Read it again, he said, and read it again. So I took his advice. I went home and I started reading through the first 5 chapters of Romans. And as I read it for several times, I came to an inescapable conclusion. Whoever wrote this knows me, the real me. And it was frightening at first, but it was comforting because I looked at if somebody really knew me, they might have answers to these big questions that I have. So what was happening at that time, as I was stewing over these things, there was 3 witnesses. If we think of Romans in legal terms, we're familiar with Daniel 7 and Revelation 20, the concept of a great white throne and a coming judgment. So if we think of this in legal terms, there was 3 witnesses in the courtroom of my life witnessing against me. The first one was creation. I remember sitting different times and looking at my hand. What a wonderful thing this is when you think of it. You can handle an egg without breaking it. You can give comfort. You can knock a tooth out. It has so many different uses. It's so intricate. And with all of our robotics and so on like that, we haven't come anywhere near close. And so when you look at that order and complexity, and then go out and look at all the other order and complexity up in the night sky, we know that order does not come without somebody ordering. Chaos is the natural state of things. Newton's laws of thermodynamics teach us that. So I had the witness of creation. In Romans 1, it says, the invisible things about him are clearly seen from the creation, so that we are without excuse. We're all being witnessed to by creation. The second witness that was going on to me was the law. So I read that and I said, what's the law? And somebody told me, well, Exodus 20, the 10 Commandments. So I went back and read that. Anybody who reads the 10 Commandments says, of course. Yeah, who doesn't know that murdering is bad and stealing is bad and so on? Who doesn't know that? So where did that come from? This inborn and commonly shared sense of morality. Where does that come from? That can't evolve. So that was speaking to me about someone. So there was a massively intelligent creator and designer and sustainer, had to be, of all things around us. Then there was a strong moral component that had universal application to everybody. And then with those two things, and we also read it in Romans, the conscience inside. So we sometimes speak jokingly about talking to ourselves. Well, that's literally what the word conscience means. It's we're talking to ourselves. And so this inner talk, as I was going through Romans and as I was considering these things, that was the third witness against me. And so instead of saying, well, I'm not as bad as everybody else and I'm not really guilty, I had to stand before the judge of all the earth. And I'm not trying to be overly dramatic here, but that's really what it was like. I had to stand before the judge of the earth and I had to change my plea. Guilty on all charges. I had to. The conclusion was inescapable, if we're honest with ourselves, and that's something none of us do very well. Once that happened, then God did something. So my sinfulness, my inability to approach him, my inability to comprehend what I was seeing around me, my inability to understand myself, my inability to answer these questions that I was asking, none of those were an obstacle for him. Praise his name for that. So if we go back to the courtroom scene again, imagine this. The defendant is there and he pleads guilty, changes his plea and pleads guilty. Imagine what would happen, it would never happen in our courts, if the judge got up, took his robes off, and came down and said, Rick, I'll take your sentence. The sentence is death. Romans 6:23 tells us that. The wage of sin is death. I'll take your sentence for you. You've changed your plea, and if you will believe that I paid the price in full for you, then you're going to be absolved of all charges. That sounds too good to be true, but it isn't. He saved me that night. That was December 18th, 1978, about 11:45. And I don't remember praying any kind of a fancy sinner's prayer, and I can't give you a salvation verse. 5 chapters in Romans, I guess that counts. But I finally understood who I am, where I came from, where I was going. And the very next morning when I got up, I couldn't wait to tell somebody. And it's been a real happy privilege so far to keep on doing that, just to keep telling others. We're not responsible for results. We're not responsible for how people respond to the gospel. Let's just get the message out there and let's just keep doing it. Our God will take care of that. If anybody is watching this tonight or some other night, and you're not a Christian, but you've been considering these things, good. I'm glad you're considering those things. Don't stop it. Let your curiosity just grab right a hold of you and bring you along. But be honest about what you find out and be honest about the answers. What you will find out is that you will not only have this sense of purpose and a self-identity like you can't get from any religion or philosophy. You'll have all that, but you're going to have a satisfaction and a sense of joy within you that cannot be taken away. Circumstances can't take it away. Yeah, we have the blues someday. We all have some of that, but you can't take it away. You really, really, truly have no need to reject him. He's everything that you're really looking for. And I just thank God tonight for a chance to be able to share my story of how God brought me to himself with anybody that's watching this. Thanks very much for your attendance.